Hey, it's the Range Ronin, and I have my wrangling hat on today because I wrangled up a new chapter in this journal of firearm journeys, the Range Ronin Chronicles. Stay tuned. This channel fully endorses the safe operation of firearms and that firearms must be handled responsibly at all times. Any firearm used for this presentation has been checked and rechecked to ensure safe manipulation of the firearm during any video production. The Super Wrangler is a single-action rimfire revolver produced by Sturm Ruger & Company. What led up to this latest edition? Well, it all began with the Ruger Single 6, a single-action rimfire revolver produced by Sturm Ruger & Company that was first released in June of 1953. In 2011, Ruger introduced the Single 10, a .22 long rifle version, and in 2012 they introduced the Single 9, a .22 Magnum version. Ruger introduced the more basic Wrangler series in 2019, using an alloy frame rather than steel and tapping in a Cerakote finish and plastic grips and chambered for .22 long rifle only. But folks just wanted a bit more from the Wrangler, while still being affordable, like a convertible model that could use both .22 long rifle and the beefier .22 Magnum, as well as better sights other than the Wrangler's fixed rear notch and front blade. Thus was born the Super Wrangler. The Super Wrangler sports much the same classic profile and feel that the Ruger Single 6, which in itself was a throwback design, has been present for the past 70 years and change. A single-action revolver with a long spur hammer and fixed, not swing-out, cylinder. The design would be instantly familiar to anyone who had ever picked up a Colt single-action Army going back to 1873. Before I get into the full features of the Super Wrangler, there is the basic specifications. Among one of the many features of the Ruger Super Wrangler is the price point. To keep prices down, the Super Wrangler has a die-cast zinc alloy grip frame and trigger guard, while the cylinder frame and loading gate is A380 aluminum, and the barrel is cold hammer forged steel. The hammer and trigger are MIM stainless steel, as are some other small parts. However, none of this takes away from the quality and feel of the Super Wrangler. I have handled my fair share of single-action revolvers over the years, and although the Super Wrangler may not have the highly polished blued finish of originals and clones thereof, it is a superb example of the iconic 1873 Colt single-action Army revolver, sans the caliber, and obvious, and not so obvious, modern-day upgrades. The front sight is a raised blade type that is attached with a single screw to the barrel. It blends well with the barrel, and as such, screams for a bit of contrasting color to aid in aligning it properly with a fully adjustable for windage and elevation rear sight, which I did with a bit of orange paint. As with most Ruger revolvers, that top strap is very healthy. Following single-action tradition, there is the ejection rod housing that houses the ejection rod and spring, and which is married very nicely with the barrel, and which both are mated to the frame very nicely. As mentioned, the cylinder frame and loading gate is A380 aluminum, but all is well blended in color with the barrel and ejection rod housing. In fact, the only deviation from the satin finish of the revolver is the cylinder, which is of polished steel, the hammer, which is of satin finished stainless steel, and the trigger, which is also of satin finished stainless steel. 2 cylinders are provided, one for 22 long rifle, a family of cartridges to include the 22 short and 22 long that also can be fired through the revolver, and also a cylinder to house the 22 Winchester Magnum rifle cartridge, otherwise referred to as the 22 WMR or simply 22 Magnum. The cylinders are not fluted. The 22 long rifle cylinder has no markings, but the 22 Magnum cylinder is clearly marked for such. 2 stripes surround each cylinder. Note that the 22 long rifle cylinder can also accommodate the 22 Stinger, a variant of 22 long rifle with a slightly longer casing but identical overall cartridge dimensions. So, why 2 different cylinders? For those who do not know, the 22 WMR uses a larger case than the more popular 22 long rifle, both in diameter and length. Although the bullet diameters are the same, the larger 22 WMR chamber does not support the smaller 22 long rifle cartridge. Firing the smaller 22 long rifle round in a 22 Magnum chamber results in swollen or split cartridge cases, high-pressure gas leakage from the rear of the chamber, and bullets striking the chamber throat out of alignment, which can result in injury to the shooter or bystander, and which does result in poor ammunition performance. Regardless of which cartridge is being fired, spent cases are easily removed, albeit slowly, than with double-action revolvers, by use of the ejection rod that is substantial enough in length to rid the cylinders of both 22 long rifle and 22 Magnum spent cases. The Ruger Super Wrangler and other Ruger single-action revolvers operate a bit differently from the conventional single-action revolver of days past. Ruger revolvers do not have the traditional 4 clicks of the Colt single-action revolvers. Therefore, there is not a half-cock hammer notch for loading and unloading the revolvers. Simply open the loading gate to release the cylinder from the cylinder lock, which allows the cylinder to spin freely in both directions. Note that there is no stop to the cylinder that, once released, indexes the cylinder to each chamber for loading or ejecting a cartridge, as with some larger caliber Ruger single-action revolvers. Each cylinder must be manually aligned for loading and unloading. Note that the cylinders can be easily removed and installed, but I'll go into that in the maintenance segment. One thing that I always try to include in my revolver reviews is the all-important cylinder to forcing cone gap, otherwise known as the flash cap, and which is in an area that you don't want fingers close to when shooting a revolver. The flash cap with the 22 long rifle cylinder measured out at 2/1000ths of an inch, while the flash cap measured out at 7/1000ths of an inch with the 22 Magnum cylinder. Quite a flash gap difference between the two cylinders, in my opinion. About the worst that can be said regarding the Super Wrangler is that the revolver gets exceptionally dirty after the first 100 rounds, and the cylinder will begin to get sluggish as carbon builds up. More so with the .22 long rifle cylinder with its very tight flash cap. On a long shooting time with a dirty and getting dirtier gun, spent brass becomes harder to eject. This goes away, however, with cleaning. Moving on to the grip frame, you can see that it is full-sized and more like the conventional Colt single-action Army grip frame. Super Wrangler is shipped with polymer grip scales that are nicely textured and adorned with the Ruger logo. While nice, the scales were replaced with a set of wood scales from the Altamont Company to make the revolver more personal. Initially, I had installed a set of quite nicely textured scales, but I just didn't feel that they did justice to the revolver. After all, the satin finish of the firearm said simplicity, and the selected scale said fancy, and I deemed them too fancy for the revolver. I instead opted for just a plain set of scales that, I felt, more reflected the revolver's character, simple and straightforward. I will admit, though, that these scales are slippery when held. But then again, I am not working with a heavy recoiling firearm due to the .22 long rifle or .22 Magnum chambering. Now, methinks it's time to move to the trigger. The single-action trigger breaks at 4.25 pounds. For safety, the Super Wrangler has both a transfer bar mechanism and a loading gate interlock to help protect against accidental discharges. Now for a quick note about dry firing, as this is something most of us do to familiarize ourselves with a new firearm or to check functionality or to simply practice our trigger pulls. The Super Wrangler can be dry fired in moderation to perform basic function checks without causing damage or premature wear to its internal components. However, snap caps or the safety insert should be used for extensive dry fire practice to prevent damage to the firearm and its internal components. Avoid excessive or repetitive dry firing without snap caps or comparable devices, as it may cause premature wear or damage to the firearm. Okay, I think that I covered what needed to be covered as far as the features, so let me get into maintaining the Ruger Super Wrangler. Maintaining a single-action revolver like the Ruger Super Wrangler is pretty much straightforward. After a safety check, like opening the loading gate and rotating the cylinder to check that each chamber is void of live ammunition or spent cases, press the cylinder pin release button that is located on the left front of the frame. Remove the cylinder pin, and the cylinder is free to remove from the right side of the frame. This applies to both the .22 long rifle and .22 Magnum cylinders. I'll leave the cleaning part up to you, but I would recommend following the cleaning and inspection portions in the instruction manual for Ruger Wrangler and Super Wrangler single-action revolvers. To reassemble the Super Wrangler with either cylinder, install the cylinder into the frame from the right side. Install the cylinder pin into the frame and push down on the cylinder pin button to allow the cylinder pin to slide fully into the frame until it is locked into place with the cylinder pin lock. The cylinder should rotate freely in both directions. Close the loading gate and rotate the cylinder enough to lock it into the cylinder stop. Perform a function check by loading snap caps, or equivalent, into each chamber. Cycle each chamber by fully cocking the hammer and pulling the trigger. The hammer, trigger, and cylinder should all perform their job freely and without binding. Unload the revolver. It is now ready for use. And for that, how about coming to the range with me? You might enjoy it as much as I do. The Ruger Super Wrangler is an absolute joy to shoot, and inexpensive to shoot as well, even with 22 Magnum ammunition. If you are seeking just a 22 long rifle single-action revolver only, and simply want to save some money, and don't mind shooting a revolver more traditional to the 1873 Colt single-action Army, then the basic Wrangler may be for you. But if you do desire the flexibility of dual cartridges like the 22 long rifle and 22 Magnum, then the Super Wrangler might be your choice. Plus, you get a better and fully adjustable rear sight that allows you to dial in different bullet weights and ballistic characteristics. For an additional step up in prices, there is also the new model Single 6 family, to include the Single 10, Single 9, Single 7, Convertible, and Standard. Being that the Ruger Super Wrangler is a fun gun to shoot, use it to introduce a new shooter to handgunning with the 22 long rifle and quickly move them into 22 Magnum. Or just enjoy it yourself as a seasoned shooter for sports shooting, a fun and relaxing day at the range, or possibly eradication of small pesky furry critters. Well, my shooting companions, it's time to close this chapter in this journey of firearm journeys, Range Ronin Chronicles. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation, found it useful and interesting, possibly interesting enough for you to consider adding a Ruger Super Wrangler to your existing firearms collection, or possibly as your first single-action revolver. I hope that you will return to the channel for more of my reviews. Till then, take care of yourself, stay vigilant, stay armed, and stay safe wherever your journeys take you.